a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
What does it take to grow an executive company of people helping people? Well, in today's podcast, I have Jordan. He is a co-founder of the Mitchell McClures, where they work with one of the fastest companies to drive greater profitability through better people development. He's worked in personal development since 2009, helping leaders avoid burnout, become self-aware, and communicate better with their team. His greatest desire is to leave a legacy of love. He lives in the hometown of Greenville, and with his wife, Kristen, and their son, Luke. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome my friend, Jordan. Hey,
Hello.
What's up, buddy? What's
Hey,
up,
Dylan.
man? It's good to see you again, dude. It's
Yeah.
been a minute. It's been about a month or so? 2 months? Time?
I know. It feels like it's been a couple months, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably been 3, but April. I think
Something like that. Awesome, man. It's great to see you again, dude. We connected through a mutual friend. Our buddy Dane, and we're both very interested in each other's spaces. Like, I know you're interested in virtual reality and the metaverse. I'm very interested in personal development and helping people grow and become better. I know that's kind of your area. So we kind of got put together, peanut butter and jelly style. And so
match made in heaven.
I know. So I really enjoyed the jam with you. And so I want to have you on, talk a little bit about you and your journey. And I'd like to first kick this off with just a question about, like, how did you get started? You got started in 2009 helping people avoid burnout and all that stuff. But what is the genesis before that?
Yeah. Man, I actually would think it's interesting to go before that, because I actually might go after that.
Sure.
Because I got some, I feel like I dabbled for like 3 years from 2009 to 2012. But in 2012, I kind of met a personality Jedi. Like my personality Yoda. Is what I still call him. His name is Steve Cockrum. And the way that I tell the story is I sat down and had a conversation with Steve for about 15 minutes. And he said things that I wish I could have communicated to my wife, who've now been married 11 years, but we, had been dating and been married for, our first kind of 3 years when I finally meeting him. I'm like, man, this would have really helped, knowing some of these things. So he started saying things that I wish I could have communicated to my best friends, my closest acquaintances for the last decade. And for the most part, what I found out was I'd been trying to play somebody on TV that I wasn't really, and that I was really trying to operate under other people's oughts and shoulds of what my life should look like and how that should be. And so that just sent me on a real growth trajectory to get aggressive about this. I think I've always been a possibilities for people person and wanted to help coach and wanted to be in people's corners. I think that was very natural, but it wasn't necessarily something I was very conscious and aware of towards my strengths and even some of my weaknesses in that. And so that conversation was paramount to kind of sending me in this trajectory. And certainly still one of my passions is kind of helping that breakthrough happen for people. But that's certainly like what got me into wanting to be like in the business of this versus having it be some sort of hobby or, bolting it on to, I'm in some corporate job. At the time in 2009 to 2012, I was working with Chick-fil-A, and plenty of people have different opinions on Chick-fil-A where they're at in the world, but they're a pretty incredible company from the culture that they're trying to build and just their passion for developing people. And so that was a privilege, and I could have seen myself at that time going that direction. But once I really kind of had a taste of being somebody who thought they were with their eyes open, they thought they had their eyes open to the world, and then realizing that, like, man, my last decade could have been completely different if I had this knowledge. And I had probably better relationships. I certainly would have had a better marriage for the past 3 years. I just would have been overall happier. Like that'll send you on a different trajectory. And so that was, very, very long experience told in a short way.
Got it. Well, it's interesting. I mean, looking at that, we're talking about something from what I'm hearing you say is things around, is it being authentic, or is it not knowing that you're not being authentic? Is that what we're talking about there? Good.
So I think it was more, less so on being authentic, even though I think what kind of resulted in was the ability to be more authentically yourself and be more comfortable in your own skin. I think that was the end result. I think it was truly like I can remember somebody being like, "You're so good at operations." In my early 20s, I was probably 21, 22 years old in college, and they shared that. And I remember just thinking like, yeah. And I started to say yes to those things and look for opportunities where that was the case. And the truth is like maybe I'm passionate about some of those things, but I'm not really all that good at it. I probably shouldn't be in control of all the details and managing lots of projects. That's probably just not a place that I would be best suited in. And so I think it was, I'd say the like vocabulary to describe things that I was feeling on the inside that were off. That was the gift that I really got. And what did it give me? Well, it gave me the ability to be more authentic to people, be able really for me, who I would tend to kind of get caught saying yes to a lot of things. I could now say no to the things that I probably shouldn't say yes to, because I was just trying to help who came my way.
What gave you the ability to say no? I think a lot of people they say yes to things that they shouldn't, things that they don't want to, because they feel like they want to appease people or make them happy or do whatever the thing might be. But what about the thing gave you the strength to say no? What's that about?
Yeah. Man, I like the final piece of that question. Like, what gave you the strength to do it? I think for me, the consciousness and maybe even the confidence that like, hey, I'm a possibilities for people person. I'm not necessarily like a system maintainer. And maybe that would be a thing. Or maybe I'm not even I'm a possibilities for people person, but I'm not very good at practical care for people. And so because I was so people oriented and that was very natural for me, I'd find myself getting, opportunities to do something that would lead to like nurturing practical care for a team. And that could be like, hey, lead this project for them, whatever. And those types of things would come up. Build out this program for me. And, while I actually still do some of that, I do it kind of in my own way now. And so what gave me the strength? I think it's funny because I was like, I could have been wrong, but I think it was just the confidence that like, this really is who I am. And I got comfortable in my own skin for the first time. And I think lots of people aren't there, but plenty of people like get it through time. And I feel like I just got that gift maybe a little bit early. Some people just kind of always have that. But I feel like I had some tendencies to chameleon, to try to be different people in different spaces. And so I think my past experiences of watching that go wrong with the confidence of like this newfound, like, yes, okay, this is me and these things aren't me. I think that combination of like having a little history of knowing the pain of what could have been and how that could go, plus, really going, yeah, I think this is who I want to be, was a great combination to be confident in saying like, no, I don't think I should take that opportunity, or no, I don't think I should help you with that project. Which was, it's been a gift.
God. So you're looking at from the personality Yoda, to be named, is the one that kind of gave you a bit of the insight to kind of, this is kind of who you are as a person, which then kind of gave you an more or less an identity, right? Some sort of thing that you kind of wrap around. It's okay, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe, this is what I do. So when things that came across your thing that didn't resonate with that identity, you're able to say, no, I remember in the past when I did things that was against my identity, it didn't work out so well. So I'm going to really embrace that identity that I know to be true. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's it certainly cemented like, this is who I am, right? That core identity and feeling comfortable in your own skin, authenticity emerging out of that. Certainly that would be the case, and was pretty powerful. And I still was on me to like, I wish it was just like a snap of the finger, 15 minutes, and then I just was there. But I think that continual journey of just pursuing self-awareness, and in some ways, like now the true addiction to self-awareness and so much of my work ends up going that direction, because my passion for it and some of my talent that I've gained along the way. But yeah, the sense of self-awareness, I think, has been something that I'm like, just continue to pursue and really have maybe just a consciousness of self that the pursuit of that. So, right, like not that I actually have it, but like the pursuit of learning more, becoming more aware, seeing some blind spots has become certainly, one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a deep hole of stuff to get through, that self-awareness piece, right? Because we all feel like we know ourselves, and we feel
Mhm.
like we know other people. The only
Yeah.
challenge is we're not as good as we think we are, right? And that's the challenge that I think we all face.
Oh
Even
yeah.
myself, I recently had a thing. I was talking with this guy, and he was kind of giving me a lesson, right? I was going back and forth with him,
Yeah.
and the lesson was, like, it took me like a half an hour before I got around the lesson, which was, he's like, "Hey, dude, just ask me for help." Right?
Mm.
That was the moral of the story. The challenge was is that I had this misconstrued thing around values and sets and things like that. And so I thought the point of the mission was for me to just grind through it and suffer and just embrace the suck and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the point was really to ask for help.
Oh
And I was like, and he's like, and I think I'm really good at asking for help. I'm pretty good at, like, if I have a thing,
yeah.
but the problem is like, I was like, oh, my cup's already full. Right. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, what? And he's like, he asked me questions like, where else are you not asking for help that could make things so much easier and you don't have to just grind through it and suffer?
Yeah.
And I was just like, hmm, um,
Man.
because I thought I was awesome at it. And then I found out I wasn't.
Yeah.
I
Well,
wasn't as
I'm over here
awesome as
thinking
I
like, I know I'm not any good at it, so I'm like writing that question
uh,
down. Dude, I got to take that with me. Where
yeah,
else can I ask for help?
I like to I like to ask people, but there's certain areas that I feel like I need to figure this out. This is gonna be
Yeah.
me. I'm a strong one. So I was just
Yeah.
like, I thought about this, like, it's got a point. And I was like, and if I range myself in self-awareness, I feel fairly self-aware. But that was a
Yeah.
spot where I realized I had deep inadequacies in that section. I was like, okay, I'm going back around to the beginning, going
Yeah.
back to the beginning again. And I'm gonna start asking my people and the people in my life. I'm like, hey, what do you think about
Mhm.
this? Do you see any truth here? Is there anything you can help let me know on? So
That's the
what?
interesting thing, right? So you never
Yeah,
graduate from the school of self-awareness. You
yeah,
know, that's
yeah.
I did not coin that phrase, but I certainly like it. I'm like, dude, it seems to be an infinite loop where it's like, oh, yep, I got to grow a little bit more. And, typically comes in a nice, painful moment. Like even like that. I mean, just like where else could I ask for help? I think is a true question. I'm like, man, I want to take that away because it's interesting for me of like, man, I wonder where I would answer that. Cause I know where I'm like outsourcing it, requesting it. And I think where else could I ask for help is good. So
Yeah, I feel like and I can only speak as a man. As like, I think as men, especially men that like run my own business and that stuff, and you was like, you kind of feel like we're on our own island, right? And we got to figure it ourselves. We got to build our own things
oh
and
yeah.
make our own things. And sometimes you feel super alone being on that island, and then you don't. For myself, realize that, like, well, maybe instead of me trying to grow this from the ground up on my island, I can just build a bridge to somebody else's island and ask for some help and get some
Yeah.
advice where I can. And so
Yeah.
I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Lesson. Roger that. And moving
Yeah.
on.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, that's
for
good.
you, for you, brother. I want to talk about this. Talk about what I thought my superpower was. Do you do you have? I would love to learn about your superpower. Do you know what your superpower is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So I have an answer to it. And I also feel like it's like a working document is kind of what it feels like. It's like,
Sure.
this thing could shift and change.
Yeah.
Um, what it does seem to be as of right now that this is a question that myself and co-founder Drew, we talk about this. And um, for him, we would see his ability to like see and say is superpower to see what's going on and to actually bring words to it. And it's
Mhm.
like, man, that's nice and eloquent. That's beautiful. Um, for me, our conversations always led to more of the like um, the methodical means to move your mission forward. We put together lots of M's in that,
Mm.
to make it sound nice, I guess. But the method man is essentially what I get coined oftentimes in our team internally, and it would be the method to think about how do you get to your destination and thinking through, okay, this is going to be the pathway forward. And so the models that might come into play and a way in which to think, different methods to think about how to get somebody from point A to point Z. That seems to be the superpower, is that like quickly in a conversation, I can assess and kind of give them some pathways, whether that tends to be through a question or an exercise they might go through or whatever. It just seems to be, however my thought processes works, however I tick, it seems to be this method man kind of process, which honestly, I mean, from our meeting that we had where we met together and using Lucid Chart and everything there, it fits so well with the way in which I think. And so that was also something that was like so good, where I was like, man, I feel like I'm in the right space with the right people at the right time, because you gave some things that are like, oh, this just fits in how I feel like I operate, and was able to comprehend it so well. But that would be my current answer, would be like just methodically moving people's missions forward, whatever objective that they may have, partnering with them to help them find a way that could be a bit creative than how they're currently doing it. And current kind of way that typically is fleshed out is all through, people development and growing and building high performing teams. But I tend to do that in any of my little extracurriculars too. Much to the frustration of the family on Thanksgiving or something, where I'm like, I can't just have a normal hangout conversation. I'm stuck in like trying to help somebody all the time.
You're busting out the whiteboard and you're like, this is where you're currently at, but these are some of the roadblocks that are preventing you to get you. But that's wonderful though. I mean, helping people get to where they want to go. I mean, I think everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs somebody that can kind of support them in different ways and shapes to kind of get from where they're at to where they want to go in different areas of life, because it is so much easier to see from the outside in, with a lot of stuff, and be able to paint a path.
So interesting. So I feel like where I'm at now is such a surprise to me, where I'm like, man, I never could have orchestrated all of these things. And here I am being a coach, and it's such a joy to do, and all the events that came. And then I'll talk to somebody who knew me well in high school and tell them what I do. And they're like, oh, I could totally see that. I'm like, what is that? Like there's something in that where, okay, the superpower must have been showing in some way, because it feels like such a luck of the draw for me going through it linearly. But for them, they're like, yeah, this makes sense.
Makes sense. Well, yeah, so people can see it, and and get the basis. And for us, we could do anything in this world, right? But we can kind of lean on what are our proclivities, like what are the things that really resonate with us, which is interesting. And it's cool to see that. It makes sense if you're into people development, and one of your superpowers is to help paint paths for them to be able to follow. Then that seems to be that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What do you think is a typical, if you help paint paths to get people to where they want to go, and what do you think are some typical like roadblocks? What do you think are the common obstacles that people face when they're trying to get from where they're at to where they want to go?
That's good. I kind of wanted to ask you what did you think your superpower was, but we can come back.
I can. I'll come back. Okay, I'll answer right now. I'll give you a chance to think about that. So, in terms of my superpower, I've really it's two things. One, I'm a connector. I just like having long, deep conversations. I very much enjoy just understanding people, and that's one. The other one is like system architecture. So I'm really good at boxes and squares with words in them, and taking complex information and disseminating it into simple to digest format and giving it to people. So design, they say, hey, what do you want to do? You want to do all of this stuff? Great. Well, here's what this looks like in boxes and squares. And this is what you need to do to kind of map out some sort of architectural system. So when I meet with clients or I meet with anybody, I'll map out stuff. I'll map out systems or architecture or applications or designs or programs or feasibilities, and you'll see it. And that's why I use boxes and squares and shapes, because I hold a lot of that shit in my head. But if I can get that out on paper and then co-collaborate with it, that's kind of what I do.
It is. I have lots of big whiteboard post-it notes.
I love whiteboards. You'll see me get frustrated if we try to have a conversation. I can't draw on anything. I can't. I was like, I got it. It's here. I got it. And they're like, what are you saying? I was like, too much information. Hold on. And so got to get it out of my own internal reality onto a collaborative reality so that we can communicate. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yes. Bringing it back. Obstacles for somebody's journey. Obstacles as to, what's in the way of their path. The one that immediately came to mind when you said that was just the quote, which I think is, I learned it from design thinking, which is, a problem well defined is half solved. And in terms of like, what do I think happens most often is sometimes we can oversimplify our problems, and we complexify our solutions, where it probably needs to be the other way around, where we need to understand the complexity of our challenges, the complexity of our problems, and treat it as such, and then find simple solutions to move us forward in a positive direction. I think just understanding, like, what are you trying to solve, and what are the challenges? That would be one. I mean, that's not necessarily at the individual level. A lot of times that's more of a team level type thing that they're trying to get through, and they've got this
That's
big
really.
hairy thing.
Oh, I want to start with that. That's
Yeah.
actually really interesting. I want to kind of just dive into that for a second.
Yeah.
So people under complexify the problems, and they over complexify the solution, which that seems to, but we really should do the opposite. We should complexify the problem and then simplify the solution. Actually, that makes a lot of sense to me, because in terms of like human behavior, in terms of gamification, and in terms of like any of this stuff, that to get people to do things, you have to keep things simple. And if I say, okay, what you have to do is you have to whack this mole, right? Here's a hammer, whack the mole. Got it, right? But if I go, okay, but you got to take a look at the sunset, and you got to make sure it's at the right time, and you got to check your watch, and you got to check with these 7 friends, and you got to tie your shoelace, and you got to hop around a circle, and then you can have, it's like too much, right?
Yeah.
And then, but if you get really detailed on what the real problem is, and you get absolute clarity on that, okay, and you know that, what is bringing it for me is that usually most people aren't willing to face their demons, and they'll only glimpse at it, right? They're like, oh, that's a problem, right? And they'll hide from it, right? They won't ever deal with it. I know for myself or whatever, but unless I stop and look at the problem and spend a lot of time looking at it and thinking about it, I had a thing around. I was talking about this with you, and I want to actually use this as a point. Is I was talking about you. So I'm going through a thing right now where I'm last year I was absolutely ripped, super ripped, right before I got married. Looks very, very sexy, very sexy. No, but I was in very good physical shape. This year, post marriage, a little bit more out of shape.
Yeah.
So I'm on my own health plan to get things in place. So I made a game plan, put things in place. But then I noticed that I started to slip up here and there. And I started like, okay, well, what is the issue, right? And I was smoking weed. I smoke weed occasionally because I enjoy it and it's fun.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I started gaining the weight, and I was like, oh man. And I was like, what's the issue here? And I was like, is this weed the issue? And I started looking at it, and I was like, well, here's what happens. And I started analyzing, okay, I do really well. I lose weight. And then I smoke weed. And then late at night, I eat a whole bunch of food. And I go, okay, well, it seems to be that weed caused me to gain weight is one of the pieces. And I thought about it more, and I was like, if I did remove the weed, I wouldn't get the late night cravings much, which would be better. But if I wanted to, I could put a rule in place that just says I can't eat after 8 p.m. Right. And if I did that, I could have as much weed as I wanted, whatever. It's just stop the whoop right there.
Yep.
And that's it's a complex. Why is my weight going up? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons. Am I working out? Am I doing this? Am I eating the right? Am I having macros? Is it organic? Is it whatever? Is it whatever? But if I had a simple solution, which is like, just don't eat after. So even eat.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. All right. Now, but I want to complexify it, because there's like a feeling inside of me that's like wants to give a sense of like it's too hard, don't even try. It's too complex, why even do it? It's too much effort. There's too many things. There's too many spinning plates. I'm too busy.
Yes.
Like, work's too hard. I got too much stress. There's something, and it's just interesting to see if you made it dead simple. It's like, no, just don't eat after 8. Just don't eat after 8.
Yeah.
So that's coming up for me. So I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, again, all the different things that you could do ends up just building a wall of resistance, and we got to keep resistance as minimal as possible, because it's already, it doesn't take much resistance to stop a human from doing much. And so
that's so true, man.
It's like even the most disciplined of us still can get thrown back by just a little bit of resistance. And very much in line with your story. Just this morning, my first call of the day.
Yeah.
I'm talking with somebody. They're now using a personality profiling system. I like a lot of them, so I'm I'm pro many of them, but they happen to be using predictive index. And so I'm having a conversation with them about a troublesome employee, and they think the problems are going to be found in this person's personality. And I think this is a good example because I've talked so much about personality. Even my own life's problems were found in personality. Well, we look at the data and we look at the role and we're talking about what's needed. And the truth is like this person's personality has nothing to do with this challenge. And so I start asking some questions. I've never met this person in my life. Don't know much about them. Don't even really know the role other than like they told me the general things they're looking for. But I just asked some questions about like health, energy, what are they doing? And they started knowing. They're like, oh yeah, that person talked about this. You know, they weren't eating as much. They've gained 20 pounds since working here, and they're really, you know, not feeling like themselves. And I'm like, well, we go all the way back to like, okay, the solution would be really good. Of like, I think right now, could they just essentially do some positive movement for them? Honestly, like a little 20-minute walk. You know, probably even less than that, you know, whatever, that might be too much resistance. It's still reasonable weather where this person lives. It should have been, you know, about 80s in the 80s. So they could probably get out and walk right now. But looking at them going, man, they have lots of things going on. Like this person's probably, you know, got a chance to lose their job. They're not feeling energized. Their relationships are at tension with their bosses and with their coworkers. The coworkers are essentially complaining about them. You know, they're not eating well and they know about it. They feel fat. It's like, man, there's a lot of complex problems in there that we really could embrace. And really, when I started talking with them, it was just the oversimplification of this person's not doing well at their job. It's like, well, do we really understand what's going on? And when we did, it became very clear of like, if you could just help this person do this, this would give such a trajectory towards confidence that they probably would be more assertive as a leader, which they're kind of struggling at leading their team in some ways in terms of communication and leading some team meetings and back to like complex problems. It's like, well, plenty of people just go, they're bad at leading team meetings. Well, this is the perfect team meeting agenda. And it's like, it's not about the team meeting agenda, y'all. You know, like so few times is it about the team meeting agenda. And sometimes it is, you know, I have a pretty good answer for like what a team meeting agenda should look like. But you know, 90% of the time it's not that. And so I think that's a good one that I've seen that we can just explain away.
Well, I also think that's what's really good on that one too, is that we're so quick to stereotype other people's problems as it's their fault. Right. You know what I'm saying? That thing is like, oh, he's not a good person. He's not a good worker. She's not a good worker. Them or they are not good workers.
Yeah.
You know, insert things, and it's because of I know that type of personality, and then it's like it's that adversarial versus like, okay, let's understand them intimately, right? And it almost makes you think about the thing I heard saying somewhere. It's like it's hard to hate up close, you know. You get in people's faces and you start to talk to them and have a conversation with them. If you've had 5 minutes of intimate conversation with the person that you hated the most, it'd be very quick to turn around that conversation, you know.
That's it. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I tend to I have made the same mistake even in my own work. Like, so much, like I really am passionate about, I think knowing your personality, I've talked about it a bunch already, but like is really, really important. And it's my personal journey, but I don't think much is, you know, in terms of like transformational things, like some level of habit in your life that you didn't have prior, that could be a positive habit, you know, whether that's a movement habit, an eating habit, a meditation habit, you know, an affirmation, or writing a love letter to your spouse habit, whatever. There's plenty of positive habits that you could add. When I first was starting to like teach people through these things and help people construct rituals for themselves or for their business, because I think you can actually have some that could help you immensely as you enter into your workday. And so I'd even help them design their first couple hours of their workday if they had a chance, if they had control over that kind of thing. And I just really was passionate about it. But what I tended to find was like, man, I was complexifying these solutions, and that really I just needed them to help them see all the complex things that were going on that were causing this thing, and kind of make sure they saw how challenging life is right now with the absence of a simple solution. And then the one thing that I started doing is I would, especially with clients, you know, for non-clients, I would still recommend this, but for clients, I'd require they drink 16 ounces of water immediately when they woke up. And to do that for our first 30 days of working. And if they didn't, like, we would have a conversation. Like, that would be like our first accountability. And so it helped me provide a simple solution as coach, which I increase accountability to a level that they probably don't have in their life, most likely at a really high level, which is a gift to them. And it's good for me. But then they also get the momentum of, I can actually establish a habit, which so many people even have that problem they have to challenge because they still have that doubt of a couple of decades of New Year's, resolutions, and they didn't, they all failed in 7 days. And so they already have like self-doubt that they may or may not be conscious of that's fighting against doing this new thing that they say they want to do. And so I started making it a lot simpler, and it was crazy the momentum that we would gain just by them being like, I drink water. And I still have so many people that are so passionate. Like, I still drink my 16 ounces of water ever since you told me. But it's such a it's a gateway for, I can do hard things, essentially.
Yeah. Dude, what you're talking about is really on point. And I think a lot of people feel like, what's the secret? Show me the secret, right? And we're talking about is the like, masters don't ever not do the fundamentals, right? And these are the fundamental things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, can you make a habit and keep a habit?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, are you able? Yeah. Are you constantly, do you have the habit of self-awareness? Are you able to, cultivate that? Like, there's some really cool things in that. I got about 8 questions that I'm thinking of right now, but I'm going to start with one.
There we go.
Right. So one being is, you talk a lot about personalities. One, what are your personality? Like, if you were to define your personality, how would you define your personality specifically?
Yeah. So one that I've kind of been hinting at and kind of sharing is like possibilities for people person.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean is I have a future orientation and a values orientation. So, I want to connect on the human being level before we connect on the human doing level, right? It's essentially that piece. It's like, I have this relational orientation that, like, I want chemistry and connection before I care about your competency. Plenty of people are vice versa, right? I learned that I was an executive headhunter in Atlanta for a period of time in my life. And I realized I was recruiting these big 4 accountants, and they were so competency driven and I was so chemistry driven. I started to switch up how I was having conversations with them, just starting with like letting them know that, like, I'm not stupid, essentially, and that I have legitimate opportunities for them. And it's amazing the chemistry that would be allowed to follow after that. But that's back to like treating others the way they want to be treated. It's a little bit of like, what does the golden rule really mean? Treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, how do you want to be treated? You want to be treated fully known, fully understood. Somebody speaking in your language is such a gift. So at the core, I would say it's those things. A future orientation. I want to think about Dylan's possibilities and, like, how can I help Dylan? Even thinking about from the sense I've met, like, it's a very natural. When Dylan comes in my mind, I'm thinking about, like, who do I know? What do I have? What resources are available to me that I might be able to help him in his life? And so that's very core to me. Plenty of people would share that orientation as well. And then there would be like some other components, which is I'm better at spur of the moment, troubleshooting, spontaneous, just ask me a question. I'm going, I didn't need much prep for the podcast because I probably wouldn't have prepared anyway. And so I've learned to still be a Boy Scout, and being prepared is a good thing. And so I've done that, but that tends to be more of a discipline for me than a natural personality trait. And then, how do I get my energy? It's through activities, being out and about, the sharing of ideas. It is social at times. So you could say more extroversion, but more of like that out and about extroversion versus just people related stuff. When I'm able to get my thoughts out, talking out loud, like that tends to be it. And so, how would I understand myself? It's really, can I have some future orientation of like, let's help with something going on in the future for the sake of people, in a more spontaneous way. So in my role as coach, typically when I'm showing up and I'm asking a conversation, what's the biggest obstacle you've been facing this week? I don't know what's about to happen. Well, that puts me at the edge of my seat, and I tend to play well right there. And and then I'm also engaging with the person in conversation. So it's an extra, energizing piece. So it's felt like a great fit for me. Whereas, you have other people that would prefer maybe more internal reflection, maybe a little bit more time to themselves to prepare, versus just talking to think, which I think that, for the sake of the podcast, who knows, I've probably been confusing at times too, because I've probably been talking to think, and apologize for that. But for the most part, those are some of the things, the strengths that are tied to that. The weaknesses are on the same coin, right?
Yeah, it's both sides of it for with everything, right? With all this stuff, and it makes a lot. I mean, it's cool, and it's cool to see where you're at with what that is. I mean, it's you want to help people, you help them get to where they're at. You want to help them get a future. You want to connect with them first. You want to make a connection before making a request or whatever the thing might be. But you want to connect with people, which is an important way. But it is right. You do come across very logical, individualistic kind of mindsets, right? They want to show competency first, right?
Yeah.
And they, they want to know, which is fair, which is valid for some people, right? And they want to, okay, well, how are you? Because some people look at people being nice or being polite or wanting to connect as, oh, well, they're not smart, right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you could. I've seen a bunch of people that mimic pretending to be smart that just aren't nice people either, and they're just, and so it's like. It's we're just trying to make calculations based upon, okay, where's this person at? So I think it's good. Like, hey, I have opportunities on this that it could, but you're also speaking not the way that you'd want it, but you're trying to get into their head of what do they want? What do they want from their thing? They want to know I'm not wasting their time. They want to know there's a real opportunity. They want to know that I'm not just trying to pick them up and get their number, right? Flash them your wedding ring and your kid. And so, but like, what I'm saying? So it's very cool to see that pattern, and being aware of that in terms of people finding their own personalities or going through that path to kind of discover themselves. What would you recommend for people to be able to do to be able to understand themselves more?
Yeah, I do think there's an element of like, take some personality assessments. Mm-hmm. I think the warning there is like, the personality assessment combos with friends. I just find that those, like, there's a few, I tend to be in those that are like the pop personality conversations where they did the BuzzFeed quiz or whatever. And, you're Iron Man or whatever. And, what Marvel character you are. I found that some of those could be more detrimental, mainly because you open yourself up to a similar thing that I experienced the pain of, which is somebody saying, oh, you're totally this, you're totally that. And you end up leaving feeling like you're in a box. And so with all the stuff that I shared, all that stuff is good. And I know the counter of it. And I feel like, okay, it's worth me investing in these strengths versus feeling stuck in some of those places. And so I think that's probably my warning. But I think taking different personality assessments out there, there's lots of free things to do to take those now. And just embracing all of them and then starting to figure out, like, what is this one trying to assess? Instead of, I don't think there's any reason to imagine them competing. There's so many, and most of them don't actually compete. That would be one, self-discovery. And I think two, I think it's taking that experience and then going after doing some type of 360. So from corporate language, there'd be the 360 review, and we're gonna do leader 360s, and what that would look like is, essentially, you're going to send some type of assessment out to your boss, to a couple peers, to your direct reports, and they're all going to be able to provide feedback on what it's like to be led by you, work with you, and they might have qualitative stuff with the survey, and who knows what quantitative things they might add to that. But it's about getting this 360-degree view of who you are. And so there's actually a path that I would recommend people do, which is, you don't have to do that 360 in your company. In fact, doing it in your own life is probably even more valuable. There's an exercise called the Reflected Best Self exercise that I think was originated from the University of Michigan. And the exercise, it is this. You guys could, if you're listening, you could search Reflected Best Self exercise Michigan. It's probably going to pop up, and you probably copy and paste the emails. But the idea would be that you would send out a message to people who know you. And you'd ask them to essentially say, what's one value or contribution that you make? and to essentially give 3 of those. And then you take that data, you compile it, and you begin to look and say, okay, I've essentially asked people to say, what does my best self kind of reflect back to you? And I think from a positive psychology standpoint, I would recommend that direction early on, because especially if you're beating yourself up of, I want to learn more about my personality because all of these problems that are going on in my life, I would encourage taking a reflection to figure out, like, what gifts are you bringing to people? What values, what contributions are you bringing? Starting there, I think that has been, probably the most powerful. I learned a lot about personality assessments, and I know quite a bit about a few, but I think the actual feedback from people that know you, love you, and you get that stuff, that's the game changer on the self-awareness journey. And so you really learn a lot about who you are in those spaces. I still look back to some of that and like, man, that's amazing. So the reflective best self exercise, doing some level of a 360 while also comparing that to really balance it out. Because, just for me, I had friends that probably would have said, you're the best at administration, you're good at this. If I had done that exercise when I was 21, and that would have just been complete bullshit, it just wouldn't have been true. And so combining some level of getting feedback from peers while also getting some of these personality things to kind of give you some extra data. My favorite thing about the personality assessments is it just gives you a common vocabulary to describe hard to describe things. Like I have a future orientation.
So the power of having the personalities is it gives you a language to be able to describe things that are difficult to describe.
Yeah, that's why I think it's most powerful. Of like, I have no soapboxes. I used to have soapboxes for different ones, but now I'm realizing they're all actually just vehicles so that you and I aren't, I'm not speaking English while you're speaking Spanish, right? It's like, if we can speak the same language.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
man.
It's almost like my own interpretation of that. It'd be if me and you are both in one room and we're smelling food from a kitchen, but we just don't know what that food is. We're just like, that's good. That smells delicious, right? But we don't know what it is. And it's not until we walk around the corner like, oh, that's lasagna. That's what that is. Or that's whatever insert food that's delicious to you, right? But then you say, okay, that is what that is. It gave us a feeling. It gave us a smell. It gave us a sense. We could observe certain things. My nose smells this. But to define what the origin of it is, I have a future focused behavior or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Got it.
And just think, the power of language, right? Like blue, like who got to choose that blue is blue, right? It's like, well, it's just 4 letters from an alphabet. It's like, who put that together? But like 4 letters from alphabet that we put together, BLUE, and now we call this thing blue. And so anytime somebody says blue, they all look and go, yeah, that's blue. And so that common vocabulary allows us to orient ourselves around things to better understand our experiences.
Yeah, because a lot of it involves us, because you mentioned this before, and I want to get towards this on this topic, is you talked about self-awareness, understanding yourself.
Yeah.
And then the best way to understand yourself, a lot of ways. 1, personality test. 2, talking to the people that know us well, right? The people that are close to us, whether they're family or friends, significant others, co-workers, you insert it, right? And you start to understand that. But then there's a greater piece to this of the fact that we all work together towards something, whether it's the family, well, then it's make sure the kids don't die and be successful, right? The other one, if it's a business, work to go build things up, right? And you're working together as a cohort, right? And whenever you try to work together, people form opinions about the people that they work around, right? Whatever those insert opinions. Yeah. So you talked about making high performance teams work together, which I feel like one of the first steps along that pathway is to know yourself, know how you fit in the world, know what you're good and not good at, and those pieces. Yeah. I think all of this is moving towards the fact of functioning together as a unit, right? Yeah. Do you want to talk to us just a little bit about some of the elements that it takes to form together as a powerful unit, or what makes good high performance teams?
Yeah. So there'd be a few things that we would surf on here. 1, people could go read Patrick Valencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I think that's a great, it's a parable type book, I guess. It's written in story format, and I just love his books from that standpoint. And so at the core, at the base level of like, how do I develop a team that can get results? He would say it's trust. And I wouldn't disagree that, like, okay, what we're trying to do is trust. Okay, how do we actually get trust, right? Like, what do we have to do to actually make that possible? I think brings in some interesting thoughts. I'd also have to mention Google between like 2010, 2015 did a 2-year study on high performing teams. How could they design teams to, be the best teams? And, they're very data analytical approach, data driven approach. And so they're studying all these different factors. I think they study like over 180 different factors, all coming down to realize that like it has very little to do with the personalities. To the point that I'm making, it has very little to do with like the actual people. What they found was like the most dominant trait was psychological safety, which you might know, have talked about because it feels to be a very popular thing by this time. But psychological safety was the number one trait that they found. That was like the one trait that rules them all. And they actually didn't know what the phrase was until they came across a Harvard business professor's research. Amy Edmondson had coined the phrase psychological safety, and it was the willingness of the team members to be willing to take a risk, essentially. And so to speak up in the meeting when everybody's opinion is going this way and you have a differing opinion and you go, hey guys, I think we might be overlooking this, to take that risk of, being shamed or being like ridiculed, of going, or essentially feeling incompetent, right? That willingness to take a risk was the number one trait, which I think is just a powerful piece. But we still are kind of left with like, okay, so how do we get there? Like, okay, I know, yes, psychological safety, yes, trust. I want to get to those things. I would say the pathway that we can find, it's a bit of like a flywheel that like, if we can do this, well, then it makes it almost inevitable that we'll get the psychological safety, that we'll get the trust. Really comes around, I believe, is communication. Mm-hmm. Communication potentially being an oversimplified term for a complex, challenge, mm-hmm. which would be, do we understand each other's differences? Because if you and I understand each other's personalities, it's less about having all the same personality on the team or the right intricacies of personalities, but it is about us understanding each other. Because us misunderstanding each other, making assumptions, telling narratives about one another that aren't true, that increases relational conflict, which essentially diminishes our ability to do task conflict well. And we need to be able to do task conflict well, because that's literally like the project that we're working on, the goal that we're going after, like whatever that is, applying our skills to get a result. Like that's all task conflict, and relational conflict gets in the way of that. Right. It gets in the way of trusting one another to move with speed and all that. And so communication would be that piece. And so that could be communicating expectations too. Like, this is what it looks like to be on this team. Value systems. I think I listened to, can't remember exactly which one of your podcasts it is, but you guys talked about value systems, mm-hmm. And the power of values. I've heard you talk about that before. I'm going, man, value systems are so huge to go, okay, people like us do things like this. Right. And going, all right, when somebody's out of the line of that, it's such a good motivator towards what culture looks like. But so often we can leave with accidental values that aren't actually communicated, that emerged out of, nowhere. And so communication, to me, that would be like the gateway to like opening the door. Okay, now we can get trusted relationships. And if we can get that, our relational conflict will now go down, because we all have tons of grace for one another. I mean, it's literally like, our joints now have the fluid in them, or the oil in the car, so that our engine won't blow up. Okay, now we've got that. Well, now that we have this relationship, we can have the task conflict that we need to have so that we can get aligned on the mission, get aligned on value systems, get aligned on responsibilities, get aligned on anything that might be misaligned. We can access that. And that makes it inevitable that we can execute with speed, execute with pace, and take advantage of opportunities, and really realize our actual potential as a team. And so at least the best I believe is like the first piece would be communication of expectations. And, in terms of like, how do people end up getting unsatisfied in their jobs, so much of it is just unmet expectations. The boss wasn't the person that they wanted them to be. When they first got in, the boss was pumping them up. They were so visionary, they were excited, and then they weren't consistent. They did something that they thought was ruthless because they didn't actually understand the person's true intention. All of that stuff gets in there. It starts to create narratives in our head. We start to tell ourselves stories of those are the good guys, these are the bad guys. And as soon as we start thinking the good guys and the bad guys, everything goes to crap, right?
The shit, yeah.
Yeah, that's not real,
So you hit something really interesting, right? And there's actually one, I think, so you're talking about this, the importance of having a high performance team. But the reason, one of the things that humans do better than anybody else, anything else, is our ability to work together, right? So we work together really well, right?
Yeah.
And
us, the bees and the ants, but probably
yeah, it might be, the ants might win it, but you're looking at it but the way to create that is psychological safety, right? The question is, how do you get psychological safety, right? Because the humans are weird in the sense that psychological safety isn't necessarily about telling people that their shit doesn't smell. It's about telling people that your shit smells, and I'm telling this because I love you. And that psychological state, because you've been in situations in the corporate world, which is the worst, where they come across everything's good, everything's great, and you can tell that they only have one vector of communication, and that's everything's great, everything's rosy, please don't sue me. Everything's great, everything's rosy, please don't sue me, right? And you can't actually have that real talk. Versus if you're out fishing with the boys, right? And you're out fishing with the boys, right? It might be some of the most vile, offensive, inappropriate speak, right? But you feel psychologically safe to be very deprived and communicate, because that everything that comes out of the mouth is a joke or just trying. The whole goal is to try to get the other person to gag, right, or laugh or whatever the thing. Insert the joke. So it's like, how do you balance out that, creating that psychological safety along with authenticity, where that the person they're saying is real? Because I don't think it's just psychological safety. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if I said everything's great, everything, and you could crap all over the floor, and I go, oh yeah, the emperor has no clothes, right? And you just crap all over the place, right? I don't think it's just that. So what else? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you be authentic, right, and create that psychological safety that lets me know that you're being real, and you're gonna be honest with me and tell me when things suck, but not in a way that makes us the enemy.
Yeah, I think the real answer is that, like, yes, it is psychological safety. People just stop short, and it's actually more of what you're talking about versus how they might imagine it to be, of this nice thing where it's like, no, actually it's going to get pretty real in there, right? Like, that we have to get to those places of authenticity to even access it, right? Like, essentially the willingness to risk being yourself, which I think is, if we just even talk about how many people feel imposter syndrome in their jobs, well, there you go, right? It's just the sense of, like, actually feeling a sense of, like, okay, I actually am okay being me, and I'm okay with the implications of what might happen. But yeah, I think it's a good thought of, like, well, it can't be false niceties, right? We can't just be smiling and just be like, no, like, everything's okay, and almost like, just say anything here, right? Just say anything here. It's like, no. You're allowed to have repercussions, like, there've got to be consequences, or we're just creating really an entitled culture. And so, for me, this is like the one tool that rules them all, which is essentially, Kim Scott made this thing very, very popular, but I learned it back in 2009. I think that's before Kim Scott wrote her book, but Kim Scott wrote a book called Radical Candor, and wonderful book. She's a former Google exec herself. And she said, okay, when you provide personal care and essentially challenging directly, you're going to get this radical candor type environment. And the thing that we would have taught, that I do think, like, this tends to be like the secret weapon. We tell our clients this when we teach them. We go, there hasn't been a organization or a team that has resisted this tool that has actually gotten the results. We've taught them the personality frameworks, and they can all speak the language, but if they don't adopt this tool, it doesn't matter. The personality stuff, they're just going to treat each other poorly still. They're going to put each other in boxes. It's going to be, it's going to be bad. But if they embrace this tool, it tends to go well. And it's the sense of bringing high support and high challenge to one another. And high support looking like, real relationship, actually caring more about them than, you do yourself. Like having not necessarily like having enough of that. You still got to care for yourself, but not being so self-oriented that all you see is yourself, but like relationship and then resourcing too, right? You got to support your team with resources. And that could look like coming in through the clutch when somebody's at a deadline and they ask for some help and you're looking at, hey, I gotta get home for something. And you decide, yeah, you're going to resource them with that little extra. That's going to be this high support. And then we've got high challenge, which looks like to me is some of the stuff you're saying, which is like, we still got to be able to say, hey, this is your responsibility, or, hey, these are some results that we're looking for, or, hey, that behavior isn't acceptable here. We're not going to tolerate a low standard. Those two things tend to be the ingredients that actually empower people and that actually get the optimal results out of people. The like really nice culture, like I would actually say plenty of people right now, because a lot of the stuff that's out there and how walking on eggshells people are having to be just politically correct style of things, like it ends up being a culture that's going to create a lot of entitlement. It's just way too nice
to everybody. Like you talk about psychological safety, that fake niceness, it's like people
not safe at all.
It's not safe at all, because you're not even being real. You're not even playing the game. So that's like when certain, like if you're in a corporate console and somebody says the word fuck, you're like, oh, you're a real person. Congratulations. Yeah. Right. Or whatever, insert whatever word you want to put in. Right.
Absolutely.
But I love that. I love that. High care, high challenge. I mean, I think that to me, that feels right. That feels right. Because like, look, I care about you. I love you. I'm also going to challenge you. I was doing the coaching to one of the guys, and I coach people to build things and stuff. And we had a real conversation. I'm like, look, bro, I love you. I care about you. You're not doing your work. You said you're going to, you're not doing it. This comes from love. This comes from a place wanting to succeed. Yeah. What's going on? Let's have a conversation. Right. And I think that to me, that resonates hard. So thank you for sharing that. That feels real. That feels real to me.
If anybody, and this is great if you're listening to like think about the best leader that you've ever followed, and don't take that too official. Like think about maybe it was a parent for you, and I hope that it was a parent, because that's cool when you have a good parent, because plenty of people that didn't get that blessing. It could be a coach that you had, or a teacher, or some mentor that showed up. But like the best leader you ever had, you start thinking about them, and almost always when we hear people talk about it, there was some level of familial-like care. Like they certainly cared about me more than what I was typically experiencing. But then you also hear them talk about this calling up type experience, where that leader was believing in them more than they even believed in themselves at the time. And that's how people start to describe this person, is like, man, they essentially, they didn't call me out, and they kind of did, but they like called me up to a higher standard. And you find that over and over, is that there's this high call up to a standard that's beyond what somebody's currently meeting, while also matching it with this familial-like care. And I'd say that combination is actually what we probably need to redefine and understand. Like that's what love actually looks like.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah.
Love isn't the soft thing. It's not the all nice thing, because, like I'm pretty sure, I had reasonable parents. I'm sure that they love me. They weren't always nice, like they weren't always nice, but the love was there. And I still think about it, for my little dude. I got a 3.5-year-old. We got one on the way. We got one on the way since we last talked.
So you've been busy.
Got that going. I'm just, announcing it to the world here.
Yes, you're so productive over
there. Yeah, very active. So, pumped about that. Didn't expect I was going to be sharing that, but
congrats, cool. Man. That's awesome.
But yeah, like, I'm going to be a really poor dad if all I'm going to do is just only bring niceties to him, only bring, he just gets to eat whatever he wants and do whatever he wants and stay up as late as he wants. Like that's not actually going to serve him well towards how hard this world's really going to be.
No, I mean, one of the missions of a dad, man, is to raise the child up to be strong enough to endure the struggles of life. Right.
Yes. That's the most loving way.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like the thing is like, when someone has an easy life and they fold over anything, then they have this secret feeling that they know they didn't earn any of that stuff, and then they realize that it's like paper armor, right? You can cut them with anything, right? And then get pieces versus but that high support, that high challenge, I think is beautiful, man. I think it's real love. Real love is high support and high challenge. I think I might have technically found the name of this episode. So, that's great. So, with that being said, brother, I want to ask you this: you're in the world of people development, growing people, and making them better, and painting pathways for them. What is your holy grail, flag in the sand? What does it look like for you? What is the thing that you want to achieve by all of this effort and energy you're putting into to better the people around you?
That is really good. So selfishly, we just go individual like drive. Threw it in my intro, but it is like it's not a bullshit thing. It really would be like being able to end on just defining love for you is a gift. So leaving a legacy of love on the earth that would, essentially outlast me, that, my children would know, my children's children would know about me. That would be amazing. There was a time, it's probably 6 years ago now, somebody asked me like, hey, what do you want your legacy to be? And I said, man, I'd love to, for my great grandchildren to say like, I want to love like old great grandpa Jordan did. Like that'd be a drive. And that was really under this like acknowledgement of like what love actually looked like. And so I think at the core, if you cut me open, what do I bleed? It's that. And, the majority of my problems in relationships have been people when I feel like I somehow not been received or has been misconstrued. I'm like, that typically ends up being the root of relational challenges for me. In terms of like, man, the business, what we're doing, we are actually going to do a rebrand probably before the end of the year. I thought it'd be done by this podcast, but the new name of the company is going to be called People Profit. And it's all going to be about solving burnout and solving blind spots. But that's at the core of what we want to do, is to solve burnout and solve blind spots. We really specialize in working with fast growing companies. An Inc. 5000 company would be ideal for us. But any growing company works, mainly because growing companies demand so much resource. And what we tend to hear from them after we've kind of did our own research is they want to solve that by hiring. And there are really only two ways to solve it is you can hire, or your people can increase their capacity. And what we'd like to do is help them increase their capacity before they burn out. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't manage to hire and you don't manage to increase their capacity, then they will burn out. And so solving burnout, is been huge for us. So much of that is tied to some of the habits we talked about earlier. And then the blind spots, so much of our conversation has been about personality, but you can't fix what you can't see, right? You can't fix what you can't see. And so providing data, providing a conversation, providing a framework so that somebody could have a level of self-awareness at the individual or team level, we're pretty dang passionate about. So that's one of the things that we want to solve, is we want to solve that for fast growing companies. So
I love that, man. I love it. And I know we were having conversations previously about how you're going to be doing that in some very new, cool, and innovative ways. So, I'm sure we'll have some more conversations about that off the air and all that jazz. So that's beautiful. What, let me ask you so if that is the goal, and congratulations on the new brand new name. I think it's awesome. If that is the holy grail, right, is to be able to, embody that love to the point where great granddaddy Peterson has embodiment of. And you said, what is the biggest challenge for you to overcome? What is what I call the dragon that is so difficult to overcome for you to try to achieve that goal that, you might need to transform yourself in order to get there?
Oh man. Yeah. What is it for me? There'd be the stock answer feels like it would be like, hey, balancing the time that I deliver as a consultant with the time that I have as a business builder. Mm-hmm. And building at scale, and I don't even know what kind of scale we might be attacking, but there's more scale that we're searching for than what we have currently. But I feel like that's just a natural challenge of doing that. I think in some ways that would probably be the cop-out answer. And so for the sake of talking a whole podcast episode of doing the deep work on yourself, I think for me, it's probably just the self-doubt in between the ears of really going, hey, will you find your voice? Will you speak up to the volume that you can? And that's a bit, I have to go more into the abstract. The deeper I go into myself, the more abstract and messy it becomes and comes out a little bit, not as clean, but I think that's probably the one in terms of like, what dragons am I going to have to fight? I think where we're going, there's certainly a level of the easiest way I could like internalize it is just increasing the volume of my voice. I think our company's voice, I think we spent a long time hidden doing some really deep work, and that's a cool thing. But I think to achieve some of the stuff that we want to do, I think there's going to have to be a whole level of risk that feels uncomfortable, and so self-doubt creeps into that. It's probably that's probably the easiest way to say it. Like, what else creeps into that? But just, man, like I feel like my entire life has been drawing me to this direction, and then you come to the doorstep, and you're like, oh, shoot, like this is it. And so there are quite a few doors that we're knocking on that like have actually opened us and invite us in to kind of stay on an abstract thing that have literally happened in the last few months. And all of that just heightens the sense of like, oh shit, am I ready for this? Like I thought I was prepared. So I feel that. I felt a lot of that this year specifically versus the years that I've been doing this. It feels like whatever that level up challenge is like right on my doorstep.
So what it is the letting go of the self-doubt to have that really the belief to the point where you can evangelize, right, to the point where you're shouting from the rooftops and just really letting your words speak and do all the dirt and all the deep work that you've done.
Yeah.
Which I think there's a lot of that, like, we know you want to do the deep work so you have that self-belief, so you can have that confidence, so you don't have that fraud, so you can do that. And that makes a ton of sense, right? And then you get to the point where you're like, I'm ready to come out of my closet, step on stage, high heels on and all that stuff, which is glorious. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And if people want to get a hold of you, if people want to get a hold of your company, they want to find out how they can work with you, how do they do that, Jordan?
Yeah. The easiest thing is my emails are rather easy. You probably should just try to email me, and I can at least, my assistant might get it instead of me. You might get a reply from someone else, but j@mm.coach. It's a pretty easy email. j@mm.coach.
So J as in Jerry, Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan.
As in Jordan. Yeah. M as in Matt. Like, so Matt, right?
Yep.
So .com. So J
coach.
Coach.
So
J at
that's the easiest. That's the easiest way.
Cool, brother. All right, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a blessed and beautiful day, my friend, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, sir. Been a pleasure, man. Thanks.
Take care now. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes Quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you